The kindest man I ever knew died utterly alone. This is the story of why. And it is a story that should frighten you if you're over 45, like most of you listening right now. My name is Solomon, and I'm 80 years old. I was born in Odesa, back when it was part of the Soviet Union, in a cramped apartment where the walls seemed to hold more stories than plaster. My family was simple folk. My father, a tailor who mended clothes by candlelight on Friday nights. My mother, who lit the Shabbat candles, with hands rough from washing linens for neighbors. They taught me from the earliest days that a good heart was our greatest treasure. A kind word, my father would say, quoting the Talmud without even knowing it, is like a bird that flies free and brings back light to your own window. We weren't rich, but we had each other, and that warmth carried me across the ocean to New York when I was young, chasing a better life. I built a small shop selling books, old ones, new ones, the kind that whisper secrets if you listen close. But nothing prepared me for the pain of watching my old friend David fade away like that. David was like a brother to me. We met in the minyan at the synagogue on the Lower East Side, where we'd pray together every morning for over 40 years. He was the one who always showed up early, with a smile that could melt the winter chill off the Hudson. Widowed young, he raised 2 children on his own, worked as an accountant until retirement, and never once burdened anyone with his sorrows. When his kids moved to the suburbs, he visited them often, brought gifts for the grandkids, helped with repairs around the house. Everyone said he was a saint. But in his last years, the visits dwindled. Phone calls grew shorter. And when he passed in that quiet apartment, alone with just the hum of the refrigerator for company, not a soul from his family was there. I was the one who found him after he missed shul for a week. The rabbi called it a peaceful end. I call it a tragedy. It broke something in me that day. I sat by his bed, holding a photo of his family, and wondered, how does a man give everything and end up with nothing? That question haunted me, gnawed at me like a stone in the heart. I spent a full year after David's death trying to unravel it. I talked to his children, pored over his letters, even visited the old neighborhood where he grew up. What I discovered wasn't about money running short or health failing in some dramatic way, or even a grumpy personality turning people off. No, nothing so simple. It was a hidden law of the human heart, one our families whisper about but never name. A truth so brutal, yet so freeing, it changed how I see my own final years. You see, we all think we know the habits that push people away in old age, the complaining, the clinging to the past. But David's story proved me wrong. What I learned shook me to my core. It's not the loud mistakes that isolate us. It's the quiet ones, the ones we make thinking we're doing right. This isn't some bookish wisdom or a quick sermon. It's the hard-earned confession of a man who's seen too many good souls slip into silence. Have you ever noticed it yourself? That good, decent elder in your life, maybe a parent, an aunt, a neighbor, who starts fading into the background? They're right there at family gatherings, smiling, nodding, but somehow they're not truly seen anymore. The conversations skim the surface, the hugs feel obligatory, and before you know it, they've become like a familiar painting on the wall, comforting but no longer alive. If you've watched that happen, or if you're starting to feel the edges of it in your own life, then this story is a warning meant for you. Let me share a memory from my childhood in Odesa that first planted this seed of doubt. My grandfather, may he rest in peace, was the storyteller of our family. He'd gather us around the Sabbath table, his eyes twinkling like stars over the Black Sea, and spin tales of wise rabbis outwitting kings. But one evening, after a long day of hunger in those hard times, he grew quiet. He looked at me and said, "Shlomo, my boy, the heaviest stone isn't the one you carry in your hands. It's the one you bury unspoken in your heart. It weighs down everyone around you without them even knowing why." I didn't understand then, but watching David and so many others like him, I see it now. That unspoken weight, it's the real thief of connection, and what it steals can't be bought back with gold. So, where do we start with these habits that turn elders into shadows in their own lives? I began my own digging into David's story the way any old bookworm like me would, with the obvious suspects first, the ones everyone whispers about at family dinners or in the synagogue after services. Let's call the first one the obvious sin: constant complaining. You know the type. It's the habit that starts small, a sigh about the weather, a grumble over rising prices, but grows into a storm cloud that chases everyone away. I remember a woman from my old neighborhood, Leah. She was a widow like David, born in Haifa, but came to New York after her husband passed. Strong as an oak, or so she seemed, but in her later years, every conversation turned to her pains, the arthritis that twisted her fingers like knotted rope, the neighbors who played music too loud, the way the world had gone soft and ungrateful. Her son would visit with his kids, full of stories about school plays and soccer games, but Leah couldn't help herself. "In my day," she'd say, "we walked miles in the snow without complaining. Now everything's handed to you on a silver platter." At first, her family nodded politely, brought her soups and medicines. But over time, the visits shortened. The grandkids stopped asking to stay overnight. Her son confessed to me once over a game of chess at the park that he dreaded the calls because they left him drained, like he'd been carrying her burdens on top of his own. Leah died with a full house at the funeral, but in life, she was alone most days, staring out the window at a city that moved on without her. See, complaining isn't just noise, it's a weight you hand to your loved ones without asking. They start to feel responsible for your unhappiness, and who wants that yoke? But this wasn't David's story at all. That's what made me pause and dig deeper. David never complained, not once. When his knees ached from years at the desk, he'd wave it off with a gentle smile and say, "Everything is fine, thank God. Baruch Hashem." He'd ask about your day instead, pour you a cup of tea from his old samovar, a family heirloom from Odesa days, and listen like you were the only person in the world. No grumbles about the traffic on the FDR Drive or the high cost of matzo at Passover. So, if it wasn't the obvious sin, what was it? The mystery only thickened, like a fog rolling in off the river, hiding the truth just out of reach. That led me to the next layer, a subtler annoyance that sneaks up like dust in the corners of an old book. Living in the past. It's the habit of turning every chat into a time machine, reliving glory days while the present slips by unnoticed. Folks do it thinking they're sharing wisdom, but it leaves the young feeling like ghosts in their own stories. Take Abe, a friend of David's from the accounting firm. Born in Brooklyn to immigrant parents, Abe had built a life tailoring suits during the war years, rubbing shoulders with Broadway stars and Wall Street wolves. In retirement, he'd sit with his daughter and grandkids, and no matter what they said about new jobs, tech gadgets, or even a simple recipe, it circled back in '52 when I fitted that actor. His eyes would light up, voice full of the old energy, but his family started glazing over. The grandkids, smart kids with iPads and dreams of Silicon Valley, would fidget, whispering about Fortnite scores while Abe droned on about the Great Depression. One day, his daughter pulled me aside after shul and said, "Dad's not mean, Solomon. He's just stuck, like he's waiting for us to join him in 1940, but we're already in 2025. The visits became obligatory holidays only. Abe passed thinking his tales were his legacy, but they had built a wall, brick by nostalgic brick, until his family couldn't climb over it anymore. Living in the past isn't harmless reminiscing. It's a refusal to meet people where they are, making them feel small in the shadow of your yesterdays. But again, this wasn't David. When his family came around, he was the perfect listener, eyes bright and attentive. He'd ask about their promotions, the kids' college applications, even the latest vacation spots in Florida. No old war stories from his youth, no longing glances at faded photos on the mantel. He seemed completely selfless, absorbing their lives like a sponge. And yet, they drifted away all the same. I learned later, from a quiet talk with his son over lox and bagels, that those visits left him exhausted in a way he couldn't name. It was like talking to a mirror that only reflects you back, he said. Dad was there, but where was he really? The puzzle pieces didn't fit the easy answers. I had to go deeper, into the heart of what makes us human, or what makes us fade from it. That's when I uncovered the third habit, what I call the well-intentioned crime. Unsolicited advice. It's the one that dresses up as love but lands like a judgment, pushing folks away because it robs them of their own path. We elders do it from the best place, wanting to spare the young our mistakes, but it turns conversations into lectures. I saw it clear with Rachel, a cousin of mine by marriage, raised in the hills near Jerusalem before moving stateside. Feisty woman Rachel, with a laugh like Sabbath bells. But as she aged, every family gathering became her stage. Her daughter would share about work stress, and Rachel would jump in. You should quit that job, Bubba. In my time, we stayed loyal, but look where it got me. Secure, not scattered. Or on parenting, don't let the boy play those video games. Read him Torah stories like I did you. All from a place of deep care, she swore, quoting the proverb, "A word in season, how good it is." But her daughter stopped opening up. The calls went from daily to weekly, then texts about birthdays only. Rachel confided in me one afternoon, tears in her eyes, as we walked through Central Park. I just wanted to help, Solomon. Why does it feel like they're punishing me? The advice, meant as a gift, became chains, making her family feel critiqued, not cherished. They pulled back to breathe free, leaving her with echoes in an empty kitchen. And here is where a crack finally appeared in David's perfect image, the first real glimpse of the shadow beneath. I spoke to his daughter, Rivka, over coffee in her suburban home, the one David had helped paint just months before. She hesitated, then let it spill. Dad never gave advice, Solomon. In fact, he never gave anything at all. He never disagreed with us, never shared an opinion on politics or the kids' choices, never even asked for a favor. It was like talking to a pleasant, smiling wall, always agreeable, always supportive, but empty inside. We'd leave feeling like we hadn't really connected, just performed. That hit me like a cold wind off the East River. David, the saint, had been so careful not to burden that he'd erased himself. No complaints, no past glory tales, no guiding words, just a mirror. And mirrors, my friends, reflect but never warm you. The family didn't flee a storm, they wandered from a void. But even this wasn't the full truth. There was more buried, waiting to be uncovered, like a forgotten page in an ancient sefer. As I sifted through those early clues, the complaints, the nostalgia, the meddling words, I realized the real habits weren't the flashy ones we blame. They were quieter, rooted in what we think is virtue. That's when I uncovered the fourth one, what I call the tyranny of not being a burden. It's a habit dressed in nobility, the fierce refusal to lean on anyone, the endless chant of, "I'm fine, don't worry about me," even when your world is crumbling inside. We tell ourselves it's selfless, a gift to our children who have their own busy lives, jobs, mortgages, soccer practices for the little ones. But in truth, it's a wall we build, brick by brick, out of fear that asking for help makes us weak, unworthy. Let me tell you about Isaac, a man I knew from the old days in the shop. Born in a small town near Tel Aviv, he came to America as a young father, worked 2 shifts in a factory to put food on the table, always the provider. In his 70s, after a stroke left his left side weak, Isaac embodied this tyranny. His daughter called every day, offering rides to the doctor, help with groceries. No, he'd insist, voice steady as the Torah scroll. "You have enough on your plate. I'll manage." One winter night, he slipped on the icy steps outside his brownstone, cracked his hip like dry wood. Lay there for 2 full days, phone just out of reach, too stubborn to call out. By the time a neighbor heard his faint knocks, he was dehydrated, delirious, whispering prayers from psalms. The ambulance ride was chaos. His daughter arrived at the hospital in tears, blaming herself for not pushing harder. But the real wound wasn't the bone. It was the chasm that opened after. She felt guilty, yes, but also resentful, like he'd robbed her of the chance to care. Their talks turned strained, visits laced with unspoken accusations. "Why didn't you let me in, Dad?" she'd ask. Isaac would smile weakly and say, "I didn't want to be a bother." But that's the tyranny. By hiding your need, you steal their role in your life. You turn love into a one-way street, and eventually they stop driving down it altogether. It's not pride that isolates us, it's this false independence, this insistence on carrying the stone alone until it crushes you. This was closer to David's truth, closer than the complaining or the advice-giving ever got. I could see echoes of it in the way he handled his own aches, the quiet doctor visits he never mentioned, the meals he ate alone rather than invite someone over. But even this wasn't the bottom of the story. I dug deeper, speaking with old friends, reading through yellow journals David had tucked away in a drawer. And I found something no one expected, something that twisted the knife further into my own understanding of loss. That deeper dig led me to the 5th habit, the one that cuts to the soul, the sin of emotional abdication. This isn't about what you do, it's about what you stop doing entirely. It's the profound inaction of withdrawing your inner self, refusing to share the vulnerabilities, the fears, the quiet loneliness that makes us human. You become a perfect, easy shell, agreeable, undemanding, always smiling, but empty, like a house with all the lights on but no one home. We do it thinking we're sparing others our drama, echoing that old family lesson of strength through silence. But in abdicating your emotions, you abdicate connection. You starve the relationship of its lifeblood. Think of it like the Sabbath table. Without the stories, the laughter, the shared worries over wine, it's just bread and silence. I saw this sin play out most clearly in a story from my own practice, not as a doctor, but as a listener in the community, the one folks came to when the heart weighed heavy. There was Miriam, a quiet soul from my bookshop days, born in Odesa like me, who married young and buried her husband too soon. In her later years, with children scattered across the coasts, she mastered this abdication. Visits were pleasant affairs, tea served just so, questions about their lives met with nods and, "That sounds wonderful." But Miriam never spoke of her own nights alone, the way the empty chair at dinner echoed her grief, or the small fears of aging that crept in like shadows. Her son, a busy lawyer in Boston, would call and hear only encouragement. "You're doing great. Keep going." "No, I miss you. No, this arthritis is wearing me down today. Nothing to bridge the miles." One evening, after a particularly smooth visit where everything felt fine, he confessed to me over the phone, voice cracking, "Mom's so easy to be around, Solomon, but I leave feeling hollow, like I didn't really reach her." Miriam passed suddenly, a heart that gave out without warning, and at the Shiva, her letters revealed the truth. She'd written pages of unspoken longings, fears of being forgotten, dreams deferred. But she'd abdicated them all, believing it was love to hide. Her family mourned the shell, not the woman, and the guilt lingers like a half-lit candle. But here's the shock turn that broke me open, the one that ties straight to David and still brings a lump to my throat. It came from a conversation with his wife Hannah, God rest her, before she passed 5 years back. We sat in her kitchen, the smell of fresh challah in the air, and she finally shared what she'd held close. David had watched his own father in those final years, a man broken by the camps who complained endlessly, demanded care, turned every day into a trial for the family. David, young and impressionable, made a silent vow then. I will never be that. I will be the opposite, light, no weight, no drain. So he did. Systematically, over decades, he erased his needs, his opinions, his pain. No arguments at holidays, no sharing of worries about finances or health, no vulnerable moments by the fire. He thought he was giving his family a gift, freeing them to thrive without his shadow. Instead, he starved them of the real him, the man with dreams, doubts, a heart that ached for closeness. They didn't leave David because he was difficult. They drifted away because, in a way, he had already left. Hannah wept as she said it. He was so good, Solomon, but he forgot that love needs feeding from both sides. We needed his mess, his truths, to feel tied to him. That revelation hit like a thunderclap in a quiet shul. The sin wasn't in being too much. It was in becoming too little. And in David's case, it was the hidden law that explained it all. The greatest burden isn't your frailty, it's your absence. People can carry your storms, they can't hold on to air. But even as that truth settled, I knew there was more to weave together, more layers to this human puzzle. The habits weren't separate, they intertwined like roots under the earth, leading to a final picture I never saw coming. Now, as I pieced it all together, the complaining that weighs like lead, the nostalgia that builds invisible walls, the advice that stings like unintended thorns, the refusal to burden that steals shared strength, and the abdication that leaves a void where a heart should beat. I saw the full tapestry emerge. It wasn't scattered habits. It was a single, hidden pattern, woven from the best intentions gone astray. And then I understood, sitting there in my quiet apartment with David's old photo in hand, the one from our last minyan together. It wasn't about being too loud or too demanding or even too silent in the wrong way. The central mystery of why good souls like David end up alone boiled down to something simpler and scarier: the slow surrender to invisibility. We elders, in our wisdom or our fear, start treating ourselves like footnotes in our own stories, dimming our light to avoid casting shadows on others. But that's the cruel paradox. By trying not to eclipse our families, we fade entirely. David's children didn't abandon a difficult man. They lost touch with a man who had already half vanished. Leah's complaints pushed them away. Yes, but Abe's endless yesterdays did too, and Rachel's help built barriers. Isaac's independence turned care into crisis, and Miriam's hidden heart left echoes without warmth. All of it stemmed from that unspoken vow we make in quiet moments. I'll be easy. I'll be no trouble. But life, like the Torah, teaches through contrasts. The stone in the heart isn't just your pain, it's the absence of sharing it, turning relationships into polite transactions. David's family drifted because conversations became echoes, not exchanges. No mess, no depth, just surface smiles over the phone or at holidays. And in that emptiness, love withers, not from overload, but from starvation. I felt the weight of it then, staring at my own reflection in the window, wondering if I'd been doing the same, nodding through my daughter's calls, holding back the small confessions that could tether us closer. The truth hit like a drop of water that finally carves the stone. The greatest habit pushing people away isn't selfishness. It's self-erasure. We become ghosts, not by haunting, but by evaporating. But knowing the pattern is only half the battle, my friends. The other half is what we do with it, how we reclaim our place at the table before it's too late. That's why I want to share with you a simple ritual, one I've come to call the daily crumb of truth. It's not magic, not some ancient rite from the hills of Israel or the streets of Odesa. No chants or candles required. Just a quiet practice, born from my own stumbles after David's passing to counter that pull toward invisibility. Start small every single day with one person you love, a child, a grandchild, a friend over coffee. Give them a crumb from your inner world, not the whole loaf, but something honest and vulnerable. Not a complaint like "everything hurts today," which burdens without inviting. Instead, something that opens a door. I felt a little lonely this morning, thinking of our old walks in the park. Or, your story about the promotion made me proud, and a bit envious of your energy, if I'm honest. Or even, "I'm nervous about this checkup next week. Mind if I talk it through?" Say it gently, over the phone, or at the kitchen table, like passing a piece of challah at Shabbat. The key is the invitation. End with a question that pulls them in. How about you? What's weighing on your heart? This isn't about dumping woes. It's about weaving threads of realness. I tried it myself with my youngest daughter, Sarah, during one of her rushed visits. Instead of the usual "how's work?" and nodding, I said, "Sarah, seeing you so busy reminds me of my early days in the shop, exhausting, but full of fire. Lately, I've been missing that spark myself." She paused, eyes widening, and shared her own stresses for the first time in years. We ended up laughing over tea, planning a real visit. That crumb bridged what silence had widened. Do this daily, and watch. It transforms you from a pleasant shadow to a living flame. Your family won't feel burdened. They'll feel chosen, needed in the dance of souls. It's a ritual of courage, reminding us that vulnerability isn't a weight. It's the spark that keeps the light alive. And in those moments, you'll feel it, the stone in your heart lightening, connections deepening like roots after rain. Believe me from experience, this small act can rewrite your final chapters, turning isolation into intimacy before the sun sets. But even with this path lit, the deepest secret still waited, the one that ties every thread into a knot of profound hope and hard-won peace. And now, after all these layers peeled back, the habits that seem so innocent, the vows we make in silence, the slow fade into nothing, comes the grand secret, the one that binds David's story to every soul listening tonight. It's not a rule carved in stone, not some tidy proverb from the sages. It's a deep psychological law, paradoxical as the light that breaks through the darkest crack. We believe we're shielding our families by burying our struggles, by being the unflappable rock they lean on without ever leaning back. But here's the brutal turn. We're dead wrong. The heaviest burden you can place on your loved ones isn't your frailty, your complaints, or even your needs. It's your emptiness, that polished void where your true self used to be. People can carry your pain, hold it like a shared load across the generations, just as your parents carried yours through hard times. They can weather your storms, mend your wounds, laugh at your quirks, but they cannot carry your absence. They cannot connect to a shadow, no matter how pleasant. What they crave, deep down, is to feel needed by you, not as a servant, but as a partner in the messy dance of life. Just as you once needed their grandparents' stories, their guidance, their unfiltered hearts to feel anchored. David's greatest gift turned curse because he forgot this. Love isn't a ledger of who owes what. It's a flame fed by mutual vulnerability. Hide your embers and the fire dies. And in that dying, you don't just lose them, you lose the chance to be fully alive in their eyes until the end. This truth, once it sank in, brought me a catharsis I can't quite name, like the relief after Yom Kippur when the weight lifts and you breathe free. It's empowerment, not despair. The goal for our later years isn't perfection, that impossible sheen of being easy and undemanding. No, the aim is to stay whole, authentic, sometimes a bit prickly or weary, but utterly real. Let them see your cracks, the places where life etched its lines. That's how the light gets out, as the poet says, but more than that, it's how they know you're still in there, fighting, feeling, loving with all your scars. Embrace the full you, the laughs, the quiet fears, the opinions that spark debate over gefilte fish at the table. In doing so, you give them permission to do the same, weaving a family tapestry strong enough for the generations. David's mistake wasn't malice, it was a misstep in love, one we can all sidestep with a little courage. What we'll do now? Not run from our inner shadows, but turn and face them, inviting our people into the light. Accept your full humanity and watch how it draws them closer, turning potential goodbyes into lasting bonds. There's hope in this, my friends, a profound, healing kind. You're not doomed to fade, you're invited to shine, truly and bravely, right up to the last breath. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone you love, young or old, family or friend. It's a conversation we're not having enough, one that could change their path or yours. Write in the comments below, which of these habits or hidden truths resonated with you the most? Did the tyranny of not burdening hit home, or the sin of emotional abdication? Your words might light a spark for someone else. Subscribe to the channel, and together we'll keep unraveling the most difficult and important truths of the human soul. Stories that heal, challenge, and connect us all. Be well, all of you, and remember, the bravest thing you can do is to allow yourself to be seen, truly seen, until your last day. Shema Yisrael.